All right, we're recording. Everyone, hey, it's Andres here, live from Grand Rapids, the Baking Steel studio. And today we are making a spring pizza. What is a spring pizza? We're making it up as we go. To me, it means freshness, changing of seasons. We're going to do like a pesto pizza today, a pesto with some really nice cheeses and ricotta and fresh mozzarella. We're going to jump right into this. I'm going to try to talk less, show more, um, answer all of your questions. So first things first, um, I've got, and we'll get to all your questions too. And all the questions during my pauses, I'm going to try to just fly through this mise en place first. This is what I do. My baking steels, I've got two in my oven. It's been preheating for the last hour, hour and a half at 450. I might tilt that up to 500 right before we make it. I made dough yesterday. So I made a 24-hour dough, pizza dough. This is using our 72-hour recipe. I just shortened it to time frame to 24 hours. I left this out at room temperature overnight at around 8:30 this morning. I made these dough balls. You can see them in here. The idea is to let those dough balls and the gluten inside the dough balls rest. We think at least 3 hours before they become supple. And this is ideal. Room temperature for me is about 68 to 72 degrees. This morning is around 68, so a little cool. These are ready to rock and roll. A really simple pizza today. Pesto pizza with ricotta cheese and fresh mozzarella, and of course, fresh pesto, which I'm going to make the pesto for you. Then we're going to get right into, I have 1 clove of garlic in here and basil. I'm going to put a little bit of cheese in, right? Little Romano into my thing here, my container. I'm going to blend it up by hand. So, oh, sorry about that. I'm going to go like, let's see what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to blend up the leaves a little bit here. And then I'm going to add a little bit of oil, right? This is olive oil and a little bit of lemon. This pesto is so easy to make. And now I just blend. And I'm blending. You can see what I'm doing. And it becomes nice and soupy, right? I blend for a few minutes, guys. Let me take this off here so I don't make a mess. My countertop. And you can see I've got a nice pesto. Now I'll let this one's been sitting a little longer. Green, same batch of basil. It's just beautiful. The little lemon keeps that freshness in there, right? And notice how beautifully green this is. That is our pesto, which is our main ingredient. Okay. So now let's get into the dough. All I'm going to do for this pizza, guys, right? Let's see what I'm doing here. Let's see here. This up here a little bit for you. Take my dough, cover this up. I flour my work surface, okay? Coat both sides. We're going to knock some of that off of there. This is just so it won't stick. And now I'm going to lightly just press this out. And look how springy this is, right? Isn't that beautiful? And some folks are going to like to leave a perimeter around. I'm just going to kind of just press it out. And I'll pick this up so it doesn't stick. Just lightly press. This is about a 275-gram dough ball. So it'll grow to about 10 inches. And just press. I love the air bubbles. I'm not going to pop them. And once it gets to be a pretty good size, like 5 or 6 inches, 6 or 7 inches, I can pick this up and put it on the back of my knuckles and let gravity do its thing. So I'm going to give it a little tug and then just turn. Tug and turn. And let gravity do all the work. Right? You can see how it's starting to grow. Isn't that gorgeous? And I want to work consistently around so my dough stretches consistently. right? And just be patient. This dough has been sitting for 3 hours, so the dough itself is about room temperature also, which makes it very pliable. If it was still cold, it wouldn't be so pliable. So think of it like a yoga class. If our bodies went through a yoga class, a nice hot yoga class, how it would feel afterwards, be really supple. Isn't that gorgeous, guys? Look at that. We have nice lighting here today, too. So I'm gonna get this thing to about 8 or 9 inches. Boom. Right? It's gorgeous. I'm gonna take my pizza peel and just lightly dust it with flour and place my dough on top. You can see, right? Before I do anything else, my topping wise, I want to be sure my dough is loose. I want to give it a little jiggle, and it is. Not pretty. Now let's take our pesto and paint it on. It's really pretty colors. I don't want to go too heavy. Our mantra is less is more, right? Paint it on there. Edge to edge. Isn't that pretty, guys? Oh, man, it's gorgeous. And now I'm going to take some ricotta, just spoon it on, right? Less is more is less. I'm going to go with 5 dollops of ricotta, maybe a little more, maybe 6. I'm going to take some fresh mozz and just kind of pour the mozz on here. It's like little marshmallows, right? And everybody, this is it. Like, this is my pizza. Isn't that pretty? And now, go like this. Gorgeous. I'm going to throw this on so you guys can see inside my oven. And I've been preheating my oven for the last hour and a half, like I mentioned. I'm going to switch it over to broil now. Broil high. And what I'm going to do is what I'm going to do is broil this for maybe the first minute. Typically, I do 2 minutes, but for this beautiful pesto, I'm going to do it for maybe 1 minute. And then what I'll do is just go back to convection bake for the next 3 or 4 minutes, and you'll have a pesto pizza. I'm going to take you guys in my oven with me. You guys can see what I'm doing. So let's go like this. We'll launch. So let's see if we can take this out. You see this here? Is that pretty? Go into my oven. I'm gonna move my computer over here because I can't see a thing. I like to see what I'm doing so I can see what you guys are seeing. There's our pesto. Looks like marshmallows, doesn't it? Isn't that pretty? Now, go inside the oven. Back of my peel to the back of my steel. And shuffle it off. You can see my broiler is on. You see the broiler's red hot, right? Time that for 1 minute. So we'll have 4 minutes and we will have a pesto pizza, I hope. Now, gotta be really careful with the broiler because I don't want to burn. I don't want to burn the pesto, if you will. So keep our eyes on that. It smells amazing too. And I'll get to some questions in just a minute. So Adrian, audio is not, oh, sorry guys. I apologize. Is that better, the sound? I think it was my mic got buried under my shirt. In fact, let's go look inside the oven here so we can see what I'm looking at here. Can you guys see? Got some nice color on it. Beautiful, right? So I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn my broiler off, go back to convection bake, and smell the garlic too. It smells great. I'm gonna bake this for the next 3 or 4 minutes. Actually, I'm gonna rotate this a little bit, so be careful with quick hands, right? My broiler should be off, and it is. My broiler is now off officially. I'll bake this for another. Good. All right. It smells amazing too. So 1 minute under the broiler. You can see I got a little char on top. I switched it over to convection bake for the next 3 minutes, and then we'll take a look. What oven should oven go after broil? Non-convection. My gas goes as high as 550. Dee Dee, great question. If you have 550, that's what I would bake my pizzas at. With if you don't have convection, that's fine. Just be mindful that you want to rotate your pizza every couple of minutes, just so it has nice even bake all around. So 550 is great. Really nice heat. What is the thought behind doing the broiler first? Seems to make sense, but I've not done it before. Karen, great question. The thought is we get that steel preheated at 450 to 500. Then when we switch the broiler on, we're technically getting that steel actually a little bit hotter than the 500 degrees. So what that does is it gets that steel like just screeching hot, right? Screaming hot. And when we put our dough on there, it's going to really lift off. That heat transfer from the baking steel to the dough is super fast. But now we've got that steel, and that dough is going to create that, what they call that oven spring. You get those nice bubbles. It just lifts off the steel, if you will, create those nice air pockets. So a little bit hotter. We find the sweet spot to be about 500 to 600 degrees. It's really hard to dial that in, but we do a better job by just putting that broiler on first. I hope that makes sense. Why don't you ever use a pizza docker? Tim, great question. A pizza docker. So a docker is something that we kind of use like a fork, poke holes in the dough. We will do that for some of the bar pizzas, tavern pies in Chicago. We'll do that. But for traditional pizzas, I don't really want to knock the dough. So what the idea is the docker helps deflate the dough so it doesn't rise and go puffy and crazy. But for some of these pizzas, we actually like the craziness and the puffiness and that oven spring. So we don't do any docking, if you will. But in a pan, like a pan bar pie, we might dock it first just to help it kind of settle. We don't want those air pockets. That's the big difference. All right, so it's been time. Let me take a pic here. What's going on? Oh gosh, it looks amazing. Let's take it out. Let's take it out just so you can see this gorgeous thing here. It looks so nice, guys. Let's let me go like this. Sorry. I was ready to take pictures of it. I'm like so addicted to taking pictures of food. Isn't that pretty? Turn this up. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at those air bubbles. I'm gonna put my camera here so you can see it better what I'm doing here. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at the colors. Crispiness, right? Just really crushed it. Really happy with the way that thing looks. Got a little green, very spring looking, if you will. Underneath, I gotta do the camera here. Crushed it. Really happy with it. Let me go like this. See back to me. Boom. Take some pictures. It looks great, right? Nice with a nice little, what the pesto can do underneath it. You can see the colors here. Just an awesome way to kind of feel spring in our bodies through pizza, right? It's a great interpretation of spring and the new season. That makes sense. How long did I put the broiler on before putting the pizza in? Marcy, great question. I know this oven, so take some notes on this one. So listen, this oven I know it pretty well because I've had it for a couple of years. I preheat my steels at 450 degrees Fahrenheit using convection. And the reason I do that, I want more heat. However, I also want to use the broiler. And for class in particular, I don't want to sit and wait like 5 minutes for that broiler to kick in. And if I preheated it too hot, my oven will be smart. It'll be like, whoa, whoa, it's too hot. We can't turn on yet. We can't turn the broiler on yet. So 450 tricks it. So now I've got my oven at 450. When I switch it to broil, it kicks on almost simultaneously, like super within a minute. If you guys noticed, that came in pretty quick. I wait until those coils are red hot. That's when I go in. So I typically always will wait too. That makes sense. I hope that helps. It smells, Vicky, it smells incredible. Really does. Nice. How many grams of dough ball before a 16-inch round? So Adrian, great question. This was made, you can see this is about a 12-inch pizza maybe. This was and underneath, right? Awesome, right? Crispy. This was 275 grams. If I'm going 16 inches, I'm going to use about 400 to 450 grams, depending on the thickness and the corner cone. Like you can see how thick the crust is here, which looks incredible. So just be mindful of that. But I'd start about 400 and maybe work your way up. All right, I want to make pizza with the poblano pesto this weekend. That sounds incredible. Can you help me with the right kind of cheese, cooking time, and direction from your broiler convection oven method? Your dough is gorgeous. Thank you, Paula. Paula, I would do the same ingredients. I would make your pesto, okay? And then for cheeses, I love the way the ricotta fits and tastes with pesto. And fresh mozz just makes it a little bit gooey, right? We got really pretty colors here, right? And it looks just very springy, right? And that's why. So I would stick with the ricotta and the fresh mozz. You'd be really happy with that. I made a vegan pesto and spinach pizza last week, and I was afraid to put the broiler on. Ah, good. Yeah, so Sam, yes. Typically for my pizzas, I'm using 2 minutes of broiler. With the pesto, I just did 1 minute. I didn't want it to get too dark, too much char, but there is some char, right? With that said, some people might say it's too much. Personally, I love a little char. I think it adds a nice little flavor. Got some really nice color on there. And it mixes up the tastes as well. I'm using, yes, Debbie is asking if I am using whole milk ricotta. I certainly am. I like the whole milk. Take this off. I like the whole milk. I think it doesn't brown as easy. So Marcy is asking, what is the cause of the soft crust in the center, 1/3, when I make oil-based pesto? Cooked but soft. Edges crispy and brown. Is still not hot enough? Do you ever recommend pre-cooking the dough for a minute or two first? There are instances where I will preheat my dough. If I'm trying to melt the cheese a little differently, typically though, I'm doing it all at once. Meaning I put all my ingredients on first, then bake. And now, afterwards, I could add some fresh arugula to this. That might look nice on there. Jazz it up a little bit more olive oil, but there's oil inside the pesto, so I think it's fine. One thing, Marcy, I do, if I'm getting a soft center, mantra here is less is more. So I don't want to, in other words, really, really light toppings. And you can see I didn't have a lot. You could, right? When we see the replay of this, I went very thin layer of pesto, not a ton of cheese. I know if I add too much of anything, that the water in the tomato sauce or in the cheese even can seep through the crust and make it more difficult to cook. So again, our mantra is less is more. And we say that for numerous reasons. One, visually appealing, but two, we don't want it too heavy with toppings because then that dough has no chance to cook through. So again, less is more. Typically when I did live classes, the one thing I'd say, because we would have all the mise en place in front of everybody, people get heavy-handed and they go in and they want every flavor possible. on that pizza. So they'll tend to really load it up. And that is unfair to this dough. Even with the baking steel in the oven, it's hard to cook it thorough with too much toppings. So be really mindful of that. That makes sense. Awesome. Thank you, Marcy. And Brian's asking, less is more in my experience. Maybe experiment, keep everything the same except volume of liquid, and cook 2 to 3 pizzas to see where the limits are to avoid the soft center. Brian, that's great advice. So Brian's saying, experiment, which I love, adventure, right? And try different things. Take notes on what you're doing. I've done that so many times. And sometimes making this pizza, again, after this class, I might say, geez, I might go a little less cheese, a little bit more pesto, and take it for the next round, if you will. So we're always experimenting. But in my experience is people tend, including myself, we go heavy versus light. And going light on your toppings is a really nice touch. Will you have a class? Paul is asking, will have a class for Sicilian pizza? You know what, Paula? Yes, we will. Let's do that in April. We'll do a Sicilian class. I love that idea. I think it's great. Are there any other questions, you guys? Amazing. Anybody else have a question? No? And hey, and by the way, I'm going to give something away today because I love giving baking steel stuff away. And I'm giving a steel away today. I'm going to randomly select somebody's name. And I'm going to get you a steel of your choice. And if you're still here, you need to be here. It's the prerequisite, okay? And I have a Deb Gallagher. Deb, are you still here? I hope you're still here. Oh, and then we'll get some more questions too, of course. Deb, if you're here, please go into the chat box. The edges of my dough don't puff up. Marcy, that's interesting. Are you making your own dough? 1. And 2, do you have any pictures you could send me? I'm going to put my email address here at bakingsteel.com. Deb is here. I love it. Deb, you got my email there? Can you send me your email and we'll exchange info? I love it. Are you going to eat the pizza? Biz, I'm going to take it home with me. I cooked it like 90%. I have a couple more minutes left into this. I'm going to take it home with my wife and my kids, and I'm going to make another one too, and we'll take 2 home. And I'll have those for dinner later, probably before hockey practice. Unless you want to come over, I did not. Oh, you did not see my email. I'll do it again right here. Andrus@bakingsteel.com. And someone was asking, okay, so Marcy, my first thought, I didn't put anything around my edges. Like you can see, there's nothing, which means there's no weight on the edges. So that actually helps tend to puff up the edges because there's no weight on it. So my first thought was making sure you're keeping that perimeter empty, right? No, nothing on top. That'll help it puff up. And then obviously a hot steel and a good dough is going to really puff up. So Biz, I'll eat this a little later. I'll let you know how it is. I love it. Can you freeze it? Yes. Christina, great question. Can I freeze it like that? Par baked? Yes, 100%. However, I would freeze my dough and cryovac my dough and then bake it with the pesto and the cheese later. That's my thing. That's what I would do. I just think it would taste more fresh that way. But with that said, you could, and I'd cook it maybe like 80% of the way if I was going to freeze it. I would not cook it all the way because we're going to reheat it in the oven. But if it were me and I was going to freeze dough, I would freeze the dough by itself, bake those naked, if you will, and then freeze them like that. Then you have toppings galore, if you will. I hope that helps. Awesome. Yeah, congratulations, Deb. Please send me an email. Anybody else have any questions? You guys totally rock. Pesto pizza was amazing. Pesto smells great too. Smells like spring, right? New seasons are here, guys. And we're doing smash burgers next week. It's going to be really fun. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I love it, Dee Dee. Get that dough ready. And we will smash burgers next week. We're going to do a Sicilian in April, and we'll do another class in April or two. And we can't wait. Thank you guys for being here. I have the round Kamado steel, and you have advice on those. I use it in my oven, but because it works better, it doesn't fit well in my oven. Oh, so on those. So Kamado steel, Tim, is just like the baking steel original. The only thing different is the size. It's 16 inches. Yeah, that can be a little deep for some home ovens. 16 is like the max I found for majority of them. Just obviously be careful. You don't want to slam that door on it. I have seen instances where people will take their rack and invert it because sometimes they have a lip on the back and it takes up like an inch or two of the oven rack. So invert that. Sometimes putting your steel on top of that gives it a little bit more space to help you open and close that. What was the third C? Okay. So Adrian, I used ricotta, fresh mozz, and Romano, little Romano shaved. Parmesan Reg works great too. I put that also was in my pesto. So we double whammied, double loaded that thing. It's gonna be really fresh. Thank you guys for being here. All right, one more question here. Let's see. PJ, how many dough balls at 275 would you be able to get out of your 3-day dough recipe? Great question. 3. And real quick, how we scale up or down, it's all based on baker's percentages, right? So our dough recipe, 72 hours, is 500 grams of flour and 350 grams of water. If you divide 350 into 500, that equals 70%. So that's the scale. So how we get to the amount of grams in my dough. So if you simply just add 500 grams of flour, 350 grams of water is 850. Let's say I have 16 grams of salt and 1 gram of yeast. So that's 867 total grams in my dough. And now let's just call it 900 for round numbers. I could make 300-gram dough balls with that recipe, right? Or if it's 275, I'll make 3, but I'll have a little left over. With 876, let me get a calculator. Let's do it the right way. So if I took 876, which is my total dough recipe, divided by 3, that equals 292-gram dough balls, 3 of them. Now, if I wanted to scale my dough recipe up, instead of 500 grams of flour, I would call it 750 grams of flour. I will take 570, I'm sorry, that'd be 500 plus 250, so 750. 750 times 70% equals, so if I scaled it up my flour to 750 grams, 70% of that is 525 grams of water. And then you do the same thing with the salt, which was like 3%. So it's 1.5. So it's like 24 grams of salt. And you can scale your recipes up or down based on that, all the formulas. The biggest one being the hydration level. So your water to flour ratio, critical. But once you learn that and you want to make, 5 300-gram dough balls, well, I need at least 1,500 grams of flour. So you can kind of just do your math, put it on an Excel sheet and play around with it, or use ChatGPT to give you the exact measurements. But just add up all your ingredients and then divide it by the amount of dough balls that you want to have. I hope that helps a little bit. The rack has a lip, but the racks won't invert. I was wondering specifically if you had advice on using it. Oh, in the Kamado. Oh, sorry, Tim. Yes. Dial the temperature down. You do not want to bake at 500-600 in a Kamado because they convect differently. Those grills are different. What we have found is the sweet spot to be about 350 to 400. Obviously, you're not going to get a broiler because you don't have the heat source from above. But we found 400 degrees might be a really good sweet spot. Just cover that. Start low, but too hot in a Kamado. Even 500-600 degrees, that steel is going to be ripping hot and going to transfer energy so fast, you're going to burn the bottoms. So again, be mindful. I like to start around, I tell people around 400 and work your way up. That might be a really good number for you. If If I want to freeze the dough, is that after I make the balls or do I need more yeast? Another great question. Marcy, if I know I'm freezing dough balls, a couple of tricks. Yes, instead of 1 gram of yeast, I might double it because in the freezer, we're going to lose some of that yeast. It's going to die. So we find a little bit more yeast is helpful. The moment I make my dough balls, so like for me this morning, I made dough balls. If I knew I was going to freeze, that's when I would freeze. I don't want my dough to proof at room temperature and then freeze it because then it's already proofing. We want to capture it in that moment when it's really a really tight ball. We freeze it. So then when we thaw it out, again, it's going to start to, as it warms up, gets to room temperature, it'll start to expand. So the best time we find is to ball it up and then freeze it right away. So for example, I made this dough ball this morning at like 8:30. If I was going to go away and I want to freeze this, I would actually reball it right now and then freeze it. Because that's, again, it's expanded quite a bit already. So I don't want it to keep expanding. I want to ball it up and then I'll freeze it. Great question. Demonstrations and willingness. Oh yeah, you guys are great. No, this is my pleasure, Deborah. Thank you. And I am really grateful that all of you guys come to our classes and we'll do more and more. I love answering the questions. I'm really glad it's helpful. Thank you guys for being here. I'm Andres. This is the Baking Steel Studio. We will see you next week doing smash burgers. Thank you. Bye.